But I want you to turn today to Ephesians Chapter 3. Now, I'm going to tell you right off the bat that I am 100% unqualified to teach you anything about Christ's love. If there was a vessel that was less flawed, more flawed to do this, I don't know of one. And I don't mean that to be self-deprecating. I just think about my life and I know that I don't have a clue about the love of Christ. I can read scriptures though. So I'm probably preaching this to me more than to you. But in Ephesians chapter 3, verse 14 and page 1547, we read, "For this cause," Paul writes, "I bow my knees unto the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ." So it's a prayer, if you will. "Of whom the whole family in heaven and earth is named." And there's a whole message in that statement right there. The whole family in heaven and earth. And he's prays that he would grant you, according to the riches of his glory, to be strengthened with might by his Spirit in the inner man, that Christ may dwell in your hearts by faith, that ye, being rooted and grounded in love, may be able to comprehend with all saints what is the breadth and length and depth and height, and to know the love of Christ, which passeth knowledge, that you might be filled with all the fullness of God. Now, a lot of people think that the measurements of the breadth and length and depth and height are the measurements of the love of Christ. And I don't believe he's measuring that. The love of Christ has no bounds. The measurement is not given an object. And I think it has to do with the family of heaven and earth, where we are all his body, his church, and we will one day, he said, "I go to prepare a place for you." There's a city prepared for us. And that city is measured in the book of Revelation by depth and breadth and height and length. So if you want to tie that all together, I think you'll see that he's measuring the place where we as a family will reside eternally with the Lord someday. Not that you can't ever go out of it, but that it's like a place is there for you. And as we labor to get there, and I don't mean earning it, I mean we have it, it's an inheritance in Christ. It's given to us by grace, but we serve the Lord now in our lives. What we need to know more than anything else is the love of Christ. Amen. And I'm saddened that it's taken me 58 years to start to finally scratch the surface and begin to realize how badly I need to know the love of Christ. With all the years I've studied the Bible, I wasn't searching this out. I was searching many things, but there comes a point in your life, I guess maybe everybody faces this, where you start to realize how much baggage we carry from day one, from our day of birth, from the events that happen to us in our lives. And I was thinking about this passage in Malachi chapter 4. If you turn there. Last book of the Old Testament. This is kind of a hard message because it's as hard to talk about this as it is to give a testimony sometimes, especially when your testimony is a rough one. But he says in verse 2, and it's page 1256, by the way, of the Divine King James. Verse 2, "But unto you that fear my name shall the Son of Righteousness arise with healing in his wings. And ye shall go forth and grow up as calves of the stall." I don't really know what that means, but it sounds better than what I usually experience every day. "And ye shall tread down the wicked, for they shall be ashes under the soles of your feet. In that day that I shall do this, saith the Lord of hosts." So it's both a warning of God's vengeance and wrath on the earth, and an encouragement to those of us that are his, that are saints, the righteous, that he's going to come back with healing. And I think about healing, and I think about pain and suffering as one of the greatest obstacles to understanding love, and particularly the love of Christ. And how Christ showed so much love in healing people in so many ways, not just the physical manifestation of a leper being cleansed or a lame man being healed or whatever, but in understanding their hearts and healing the pain that's inside that we all have. Look in Luke chapter 4. we sometimes don't put enough emphasis on the healing power of Christ's love. And I guess, if anything, that's what I want to focus on today. Christ, beginning of his ministry, goes into a synagogue in Nazareth. And verse 17 says, page 1347, there was delivered unto him the book of the prophet Isaiah. Esaias is the Greek version of Isaiah. And when he had opened the book, he found the place where it was written, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he hath anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He hath sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised, to preach the acceptable year of the Lord. And by the way, he closed the book at that passage, but the verse continues when you go to Isaiah, and he goes on to talk about the vengeance of God. He closed the book and he stopped talking. It wasn't time for vengeance yet. It was time for healing. It was time for liberty. It was time for recovering of sight. And, I guess for me, years of reading this passage, the things that stand out, or always did seem to have stood out, was preaching the gospel, deliverance, recovering of sight to the blind, sort of like the miracles, if you will, and setting at liberty them. And what never really struck a chord with me was healing the brokenhearted. And I think a lot of that is because sometimes we don't realize how broken we are until something happens in our life and we understand, I'm broken. I am mostly flawed. And we have to come to grips with that. We have to come to understand. I won't get personal, but as my folks get older and their health is declining, they're in their 80s and things are, starting to wind down. I've got 2 siblings, and we meet now once a month to keep in touch with each other better than we've done over the years. And we meet together online, and we discuss how things are going. My sister still lives in the same city as my family, my mom and dad, and the 2 brothers. We live in different cities. So it's kind of been good for us to talk. And what came out of those meetings, which were mostly intended to be about mom and dad, what are their needs, how can we start planning for the future, does my sister need some help, relief dealing with them, because she has to deal with them, she lives in the same city, was us sort of opening up to each other about all the painful things that we experienced growing up. And, we fought like cats and dogs. Maybe a lot of brothers and sisters do that, but I feel like we were the worst. Wasn't a church-going family, and, somehow humor kept us together. But, boy, I just remember being viciously mean and hard to them. And I was the middle kid. Boy. And I was sort of the runt of the litter. My brother's like 6'2" or 3. My little brother, he could have crushed me squashed me like a bug. But I was just abusive to him, And I know that I've told you my testimony before, and I had sort of a false start when I once walked an aisle in a Baptist church because I thought I was going to the men's room, but there was an invitation called, and I kind of felt embarrassed, but I ended up going up front because I was too embarrassed to tell them I was just going to the bathroom. And as a result of that, I ended up, getting baptized a week or so later because I was just sort of pretending. But I just remember that after they, did the ritual, they told me, you're a Christian now. I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I didn't know anything about the gospel. I went to that church so infrequently because my grandfather took us on occasion. I didn't pay any attention. I scribbled on the Lottie Moon offerings and drew stupid pictures to my brother, We didn't listen. We didn't know what to do in church, So they said, you're a Christian. And I thought I was, and I couldn't understand why I was still so mean and hateful and fearful and angry and all of those things that are part of my baggage, I grew up with just all the time, you could have set me off with a look, and defensive and fight or flight reflex all the time, and had no idea it was going on. And sadly, you grow up and it becomes ingrained. You know, they say the body remembers what the mind forgets. When you go through traumatic events, doesn't matter what it is. It could be a car accident. It could be an injury, a health event. It could be physical abuse from parents or a family member. It could be psychological abuse from the same. Teasing, bullying at school, whatever. Getting your life scared half to death when maybe some event occurs in your life, whatever it is. Those traumas, when you forget about them later, you move on in your life, but your cells retain the event somehow. And I'm talking about those kind of things for healing, And I'm just now getting to the point where I'm having to go back. My brother, one of the ways he's dealing with his things as we opened up, and we had no idea that each other had been going through these type of things, And somebody once said that everybody you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Boy, that became more real to me as we opened up to each other. And he says, you might want to start making your trauma list. Like if you're going to deal with it some way in a therapy session or whatever, counseling, whatever. And I thought that's a good idea. I went back and I wrote down a list of all the events in my life that were painful. And that's hard to do, because then you relive those moments and those memories. But I was thinking, I guess I've had a pretty good life. It hasn't been that bad, I mean, I've never been in jail, well, at least not yet, and, I've never got robbed at gunpoint or something, And so I started digging and I started writing things down, and I was shocked at how many pages I filled. And came to realize, wow, all these things have been here inside, and they molded me into the man I am today, and it's mostly flawed. And all I want to do is get to the point where I'm merely flawed, But that healing is what I needed. And so I began to think about this. And I was yesterday just really meditating about this, how that God, I want you to remove these obstacles that are keeping me from knowing the love of Christ. And I needed healing. That's what we need. Go to Matthew chapter 11. I think another thing that Christ meant when he said this, and he meant many things in the context as well. But Matthew chapter 11, page 1273, notice verse 28. You're familiar with the passage. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Now, there's a context here about the burden of the law, the Mosaic law that was being placed by the Pharisees and the religious leaders on the children of Israel. But just taking it from a spiritual application to what we're talking about right now, it applies perfectly. We're heavy laden, folks. You know that? We've all experienced these pains and these traumas and suffering. Even before we got saved, there's sufferings for Christ, but then there's the sufferings of life. In verse 29, he said, take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and you shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. We start with Christ. You're not going to find this peace. You're not going to see this healing if you don't have a relationship with Jesus Christ. Because this is the only hope you have. The only true healing there's going to be. I mean, someday we're going to eat of the tree of life and be healed and have glorified bodies, and he's going to wipe away all tears, and there's going to be no more pain, no more sorrow, and we won't remember the former things. But sadly, right now, we remember, And like I said, if you don't consciously remember it, because I don't remember what I had for breakfast half the time, but our cells remember those traumatic events and the pain, and it comes out in the way we treat other people. And most of all, it comes out in the way we treat the people that we love the most. That's the hardest thing for me to face, is to think about the mistakes I might have made with my wife, my kids, my family, other family members. Not realizing it was a manifestation of the pain that's been residing inside me all this time, that I didn't understand or acknowledge needed healing. so that I could free myself of the bondage of that, and that healing comes in Christ. Go to 1 Timothy chapter 4. When we don't have this healing, when we don't have this clearing, and we can't find a way to reconcile it. I mean, it's one thing to just talk about it and say, yes, this happened to me, that happened to me. But dealing with it, it's something I'm not qualified to do. Christ is, and I'm sure there's people that are trained to help get over whatever the issue might be. But when we don't deal with it, 1 Timothy chapter 4, page 1574 says, "Now the Spirit speaketh expressly that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith." This is a passage of, I think, the modern times right now. We're probably in the latter times. But we're talking about a departing from the faith, giving heed or paying attention to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils, speaking lies and hypocrisy. Now watch this statement. Having their conscience seared with a hot iron. Can you imagine? We can get to the point, even believers, where our conscience is seared with a hot iron. You know what that does? It leaves a scar. And the tougher the scar is, the harder it is to penetrate. And then he goes on to say some things, but verse 3, "Forbidding to marry and commanding to abstain from meats which God hath created to be received with thanksgiving of them which believe and know the truth." Another passage I like to cite about bacon. "For every creature of God is good and nothing to be refused, if it be received with thanksgiving, for it is sanctified by the word of God in prayer." So whatever these latter times are talking about in this type of apostasy, even those that depart from the faith have their conscience seared with a hot iron. And don't you know that Satan is going to partly take advantage of the pain and the scars to sear you more? And that's one of his devices, to cause them to depart from the faith. Because if we don't deal with that pain and we don't come to Christ and look for that healing, because half the time we don't want to admit that we need it, or the other half, we don't realize that we have it, then we're not addressing the obstacle that's causing us to fail to be loving, which then allows us to be faithful and obedient and service-minded and everything else. Go to Ephesians chapter 4, and we'll spend a good bit of time in this book for the remainder of this message, because this is really what it's all about. You know, I've told you that over the years I've attended many, many Bible conferences about rightly dividing the word of truth. And I would say, without fail, everyone I ever attended had preachers that preached out of the book of Ephesians, for sure. Somebody preached a message out of Ephesians that weekend, every weekend, all my life. And usually chapters 1, 2, and 3, which lay the foundation for doctrine. Very foundational books, important letters, or rather chapters. Rarely, and maybe I could count on one hand, the times in those conferences when the emphasis was in Ephesians chapters 4, 5, and 6. You know why? Those are the chapters that tell us how we ought to live and serve and love one another. And when you were raised in a group that was mostly interested in knowledge and doctrine, and not really interested in healing and compassion and love. And I don't mean to disparage anybody. I'm not trying. I was that way. Let's put it this way. When you were raised to think that way, then you were missing so much. And I feel like I did. In verse 17, "This I say therefore, and testify in the Lord, that ye henceforth, now that you're saved, from now on, walk not as other Gentiles walk, in the vanity of their mind, have the understanding darkened, being alienated from the life of God through the ignorance that is in them, because of the blindness of their heart, who being past feeling, have given themselves over unto lasciviousness, to work all uncleanness with greediness." And past feeling literally means calloused. Almost like we were talking about that searing of that scar. And, you know, I'm doing the best I can right now to hold it together as I talk about it, because I'm trying to deal with my calluses and my scars. And I think I was a point there where, you know, you can become past feeling, so that you don't see the hurt you're doing to the people that really care for you and love you the most. And they know your heart, and they know that you don't mean to be unkind or critical or mean-spirited, but they aren't any better qualified to know what's inside you to help you deal with the situation. So they might go into their own fight or flight mode to process what you're going through the best way they can. And as I come to look at the things that shaped my existence, and let's just say maybe it was from my upbringing, then I stop and I realize my parents went through their trauma that turned them into what they did to me. And I'm not pointing fingers, but you get the idea. I'm just trying to paint an example. And so then I had to come to the point where, do I hold anger and resentment against them, or do I realize they couldn't help it either? They were damaged too. They were mostly flawed. I'm just like them, you know. And so then you can forgive them and realize they had no idea. And they grew up in a generation where the very thought of going to a counselor didn't even enter your mind, you know. Go to chapter 4, verse 11. What God gave us to help us is the love of Christ. And he gave us some helps to get there. Verse 11, he gave some apostles and some prophets and some evangelists, some pastors and teachers for the perfecting of the saints. We're going to talk about perfecting a little bit more in a minute. For the work of the ministry, for the edifying of the body of Christ. So the way I put that together is these gifts God gave us, these people, these offices, if you will, apostles, which there are no more apostles other than the Word of God. Prophets, you know, take that as you will. Evangelists, preachers, pastors, and teachers. They're not magnified as men or women or people gifted by God. Their gifts are magnified. Their office is magnified, because here's what their job is to do: to perfect us to do the work of the ministry, which is the edifying of the body of Christ. Well, how can I do the job if, number one, I'm not trained, and number two, if I've got a giant obstacle in the way? You know, I've got this block of trauma, this pain, scar, this seared heart, this conscience that's in my way. And I can't love others with the love of Christ if I don't love myself. He says in verse 13, these gifts are given to do this job for us till we all come in the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God unto a perfect man. There's that word again. I think, I am so imperfect. Why would God hold that measure up to me and say, I want you to be perfect? Unto the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. And we're going to find out what that means in just a moment. It's not without sin. It's not without error or flaw. Perfect just means to grow up. It simply means to mature. We'll get to that. Verse 14, and he alludes to it right here. To the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ, verse 14, that we henceforth, I'm sorry, I forgot to put the passage, that we henceforth be no more children tossed to and fro. In other words, grow up. And carried about with every wind of doctrine by the sleight of men and cunning craftiness whereby they lie in wait to deceive. And I used to see that and think, yeah, there's men out there ready to deceive you. And that's true. They certainly are. Wolves in sheep's clothing and false prophets and politicians. All they want to do is deceive you. I promise you that. I once had to state in a thing I posted, never make the mistake of thinking that that politician that made that statement is an idiot. Because Satan can use an idiot just as effectively as a viper. Okay? So you think now that person is a moron, and they're Satan's tool to deceive. You better believe it. He loves morons. They're his perfect tool. Okay? And for some reason, they always run for office. And get elected. And then we talk about the morons that voted for him, right? Or maybe they didn't. Right? He says, these men lie in wait with cunning craftiness whereby they lie in wait to deceive. And what is one of their easiest marks? A person with unhealed pain. With a conscience seared. With a heart that's past feeling. And therefore they're angry and they're bitter, and they can easily be misled into a false teaching. But we want to get past that so we grow up. And so part of this maturing is facing the pain so that verse 15 can happen. But speaking the truth in love may grow up into him in all things, which is the head, even Christ. And then it takes a lot of love to realize that I've got to get past this world here of my own self-absorbment to realize that there's all of this around me that needs the gift God gave me. And I'm in the way because I keep holding on to the scars. Look in verse 20. But you've not so learned Christ to walk like other Gentiles walk. If so be that you've heard him and have been taught by him as the truth is in Jesus, that you put off concerning the former conversation the old man, which is corrupt according to the deceitful lusts, and be renewed in the spirit of your mind. And that you put on the new man, which after God is created in righteousness and true holiness. And I've read that passage many, many times and thought to myself, all you need to do is study the Word of God and you'll renew the spirit of your mind. And while that is 98% true, you're going to be renewed by the Spirit of God. The Spirit of God can't touch your heart when you've got a wall of pain around it and you haven't reached out for healing, whatever it takes. And I don't know the answers for that need that you have. I'm not a counselor. I need a counselor. I'm not one that is trained in dealing with scars, but I know I have them. And I know they've been one of the biggest detriments to my life of getting to the point where I want to grow up. I used to think growing up was having some spiritual knowledge. I've got a pretty good memory, folks. I mean, not of what anything Sandy said to me, but I can remember everything else. For some reason, I have selective memory where that's concerned. I can't remember where I put my keys, but for some reason, I can remember a lot of Bible verses. I guess it's just a gift God gave me, But, boy, we try to forget the bad stuff, don't we? And we try to bury it, but then it's still there. It's in those cells. It's in those... And then over time you're thinking, I've dealt with it, I've forgotten it, but the body didn't forget, and it's still in there, just waiting to explode. And then it comes out when somebody criticizes you, or you misheard what they said, and you think they were being unkind to you, or even you're driving along and the guy cuts you off, and you react like I do, and I won't describe it for you, but it involves some choice words. And you just curse the guy and you scream and you rant, and you get to where you're going and you're still mad at the guy. And meanwhile, he just drives merrily along, totally unaware that he's in control of your entire emotional state. And you've just allowed him to control every thought you have for the next hour. And there's just one more trauma to store in your cells to unleash on somebody else later, right? And then you unload on somebody and they get to hear all your crap. And the next thing you know, you just found out you dumped it on them, right? And you feel a little bit better, but now they feel awful. So give it to the person that's trained to help you, if you can. And if not, pray about it, and God will open that door for you too. Find a way. Because ultimately, what are we trying to get to? We're trying to get to the understanding that Paul got to. And by the way, you know how Paul came to this understanding? Through suffering. Now, his was suffering for Christ, and we do too. I'm not trying to belittle any of our suffering at all. Compared to Paul, he went through things we'll never go through, but you go through your own suffering. You do. And if you're saved, Satan attacks. So you're going to suffer persecution. But through the things he suffered, he came to understand this love, and he wrote an entire chapter about it in 1 Corinthians 13. Turn with me to 1 Corinthians 13. And you hear this read at weddings, and you hear people cite it in portion and poetry and whatever. And it's poetic. But there's something here that's buried in the chapter to me. It's another Bible mystery. And it's right there, plain to see if we have eyes to see it. But verse 1 says, though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels and have not charity. And the word charity there, it's translated this way because it's the word love, But in Greek, it's agape, and it's a love that, there's no attachments. There's several words for love in Greek. One is phileo, and it's brotherly love. One is eros, and it's like romantic love. And there's others, and it might be like I love my dog, or I love ice cream, or something like that. And whatever that word is, it clearly means an affinity for it, but it's not the same as this, agape. And so the reason the King James Bible translated it as charity is because he's going to define it for you here, so you'll get the understanding. But charity is, there's no attachment. Now, don't you know it's just like Satan to twist the meaning of a word from its origin to something else, because we think of charity and we donate to charity because we get a receipt, which gives us a tax rebate or whatever you call it, refund or something. And so there's an attachment there. Satan had to do that, right? He had to add an attachment to it. But in reality, attachment is this, and love is this. I don't want anything back from you. I'm not seeking anything in return. I just want to love. And that's the love Christ had. And that's this love. Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, and have not charity, I am become as sounding brass or tinkling cymbal. So right off the bat, love surpasses any spiritual gift you may think you have. And I don't mean that you don't have gifts. But some people think, I'm this great prayer warrior, I'm this great healer, I'm this great prophet, whatever. But if you have not charity, you're just noise. Verse 2, and though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I could remove mountains and have not charity, I'm nothing. Verse 2 is my life. Sadly, I thought that knowing Scripture was what made me a Christian. And then I came to realize that there's a lot of people out there that are smarter than me that know a lot more Scripture than me. And I'm nothing, just knowing. Verse 3, and though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, and have not charity, it profiteth me nothing. So out the window goes the definition of charity as a gift of a donation. Because you can do that, and it's a good thing to do. I think you should donate to a cause that's worthy. But if you don't do it in love, if you're doing it because I want this return, it profits you nothing. Why? Because this love, charity, verse 4, suffereth long. And I'm talking about enduring me. You putting up with me is charity. But by the same token, me putting up with you is charity too. That's why Paul had to say so many times, forbearing one another in love. Because you know what? I am not a forbearing person. And I'm very hard to bear. So charity suffereth long and is kind. So we show kindness. Kindness was not something I was taught growing up. Charity envieth not. Man, I can't believe he won the lottery. It should have been me. I'm more worthy of it than he was. Hey, praise God, you won the lottery. I hope God can do wonderful things through you. Who says that? You win the lottery and all of a sudden you find out you have 1,000 friends and relatives you never knew. Charity envieth not. Charity vaunteth not itself, is not puffed up. In other words, there's no pride in this love. Charity doth not behave itself unseemly, and in other words, indecently or improperly. So if we were truly showing the love of Christ, we would seek to bring our body under subjection, as Paul said, and to yield our servants as members of righteousness. And again, folks, that's hard to do when you have unhealed pain, because it's the obstacle. It's what Satan's using to keep, what is that thing that you do that gives you temporary relief from the pain? That's sinful. Well, Satan, all he has to do is just goad the pain a little bit more so you turn back to it every time. If you don't deal with it, how do you yield your members as servants to righteousness? He's always going to have that little jab that he can keep you out of God's will and under his control. Doth not behave itself unseemly, seeketh not her own. By the way, I love saying this because I think it's just important. You know how I've told you that wisdom in the Bible, in the book of Proverbs, is personified as a woman? Husbands. Understand that? So is charity. Her doth not behave itself unseemly, seeketh not her own. Do you know why I think he did that? I think the closest thing we have to this picture of charity, besides the Lord Jesus Christ and the life he lived, is the love a woman shows to her child, to her family. I mean, ever attacked a child and seen a she-bear rise up to defend it? I mean, come hell or high water, you know. Or, first child, 3 a.m., baby's crying, and husband either pretends like he's asleep so he doesn't have to get up to deal with it, or we go find the WD-40 and try to fix him, and we don't realize you don't fix a crying baby. He needs to eat. He needs mama. And so she gets up at 3 a.m. and she feeds us, even though she's gotten no sleep, That's a picture of this love, I think, in a small type. And I'm not saying women are perfect. I realize we all have the same burdens, but there's something in that. Seeketh not her own, is not easily provoked, thinketh no evil, rejoiceth not in iniquity, but rejoiceth in the truth. And that's an important one because we're talking about the Word of God here. And if you've got this love, you're not going to reject when God tries to show you something that's true in the Scriptures that you don't want to accept because it doesn't fit your narrative, or it doesn't fit what your church has taught you, or it doesn't fit the doctrinal thing that you want to hang on to. And it takes a lot of love to admit, I was wrong. All these years I've been believing something and it was wrong, but I'm going to believe the truth no matter what. That's love, the love of the Word of God. Verse 7 says that charity beareth all things, believeth all things, hopeth all things, endureth all things. And that's not this, naivete like Lucy and Charlie Brown with the football. I believe this time she's not going to pull the football away. He's talking about in regards to the truth. There's a comma there, or a semicolon, verse 6. Rejoiceth not in iniquity, but rejoiceth in the truth, semicolon, beareth all things related to the truth, believeth all things that are true, hopeth all things that are true, endureth all things for the sake of the truth. You can add those if you will. That's my paraphrase. Verse 8 says, charity never faileth. It never fails. True love is never wrong. It never fails. But whether there be prophecies, they shall fail. In other words, not that God would ever prophesy something that wouldn't come to pass. It means the gift of prophecy would end. They would stop being a gift of prophecy. Whether they be tongues, they shall cease. And the sign gift of tongues did cease. Whether there be knowledge, it shall vanish away. And he's not talking about wisdom and knowledge in general. It's about the gift of knowledge, the supernatural gift that God gave the early church saints until the Word of God was fulfilled. And once that happened, they didn't need these other gifts because they got the Word of God. They've got apostles, evangelists, pastors, teachers, prophets to guide them to what's coming next. Look in verse 9. For we know in part and we prophesy in part. As he writes this, it's in part. But when that which is perfect is come, then that which is in part shall be done away. I cannot tell you over the years how many times people have tried to convince me that it's the second coming of Jesus Christ. He's the only one that's perfect. So until he comes back, we're going to speak in tongues and we're going to do this and that and the other. That is not at all. And you know what? They don't have charity to believe something different. They want to hang on to that supernatural gift they think they have. And that's why they don't believe it. When that which is perfect is come, it's not referring to Jesus Christ. Yes, he's perfect. He's the Son of God. But that's not what the word perfect means in the context. Look at verse 11. We're right back to what Paul was saying in Ephesians 4. When I was a child, imperfect, I spake as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. Now, not all men put away childish things when they grow up. But we're supposed to. So perfect means what? It means mature. And is it mature in age? There's some men that never grow up. You know, is it spiritually mature? Partly. But is it spiritually mature because of Bible knowledge? We've already proven that can't be true. Because you can have all that knowledge and without charity, it's nothing. So what is a perfect man? Verse 12. For now we see through a glass darkly. The word glass there is mirror. Imagine picking up a muddy mirror. And you need to, do I need to shave? Do I have ketchup on my face? Is my hair done? But the mirror's covered in mud. I can't see. So I don't know what I look like. So how do we clear the mud away from the mirror? Now we see through a glass darkly. But then, when that which is perfect has come, face to face. When you clear away the mud and you see what you really are, then you go, oh, I do have ketchup on my face. I did forget to shave. I got to take care of some things here. You know why? This is not presentable. I am not yet a perfect man. I am not yet where I need to be to measure up to the fullness of the stature of Christ. Now we see through a glass darkly, but then, when that which is perfect has come face to face. Now I know in part, but then shall I know even as also I am known. Well, what is that which is perfect has come? It's when we come to the perfect man of understanding the love of Christ. When we get to the point where we can love like this, you've become a perfect man. Not flawless, not sinless. You're still mostly flawed, or at least merely flawed, right? But you now understand that what's more important, what I want or what the Lord wants from me. Verse 13, and now abideth faith, hope, charity, these three, but the greatest of these is charity. I think one of the prayer requests today was about faith and obedience, and I totally agree with that. But you know what you need more than anything else to get there? Is charity. And the charity is the love of Christ. When we understand how important it is to reach souls, to share kindness, to show your testimony or utter it when you get a door or an opening, or to just demonstrate compassion so that maybe that turns into a door of utterance. Maybe for somebody else. But one way or the other, you did the watering or the planting or something. And what makes it so difficult to get there is this, and the baggage that we carry. And I'm beginning to understand that after all these years that that's what I've got to deal with. I just won't let go of the baggage. I keep carrying it with me, and it becomes the stone, it becomes the burden, it becomes the stumbling block. Go back to Ephesians 4 for closing. Like I said, I am not qualified to preach this message, and I don't know that I even did anything here that's useful. But I know that this is the path I'm on, and it's something that's I've had to come face to face with that I think I've been running from most of my life. So these gifts that God gave us in verse 12 are for this purpose again, verse 13. Till we all come in the unity of the faith, we should be unified, and of the knowledge of the Son of God, understanding the same thing about him, unto a perfect man, unto the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. And we know that has to do with the love. When Jesus Christ loved, he showed nothing but compassion. The woman caught in adultery, they were ready to stone her. He said, whosoever among you without sin cast the first stone. And one by one, they had to walk away until there were nobody left. And he said, woman, where are thine accusers? And she said, none, Lord. He says, I don't accuse you either. Go thy way and sin no more. He didn't judge her. He didn't even rebuke her. He simply forgave her. That's love, folks. Now, he warned her, go sin no more. I mean, he said, live your life now freely. And I don't mean to say that he meant to encapsulate in that one statement everything we're going to read as the last passage here. But I can glean from that what Paul meant in 2 Corinthians 5. And we'll read this to close. One of my favorite passages in the scriptures. And I've read it probably 1,000 times, and every time I read it, it's like, there's something more here. There's something more. 1528 is the page number. 2 Corinthians 5:14. For the love of Christ constraineth us. That word constrain means it compels us, it forces us. It strongly encourages us. So in other words, it's compelling us to think this way, because we thus judge that if one died for all, then we're all dead, and that he died for all, that they which live should not henceforth live unto themselves, but unto him which died for them and rose again. Now, this is hard for me to say because it's a scathing indictment about my own self. But I have not been living for him who died for me and rose again effectively, because I've never forgiven myself or dealt with my baggage enough to realize that it was in the way and it was what was holding me back. Which, not to say that tomorrow I'm going to be fine. Pray for me. But the next statement is, wherefore henceforth know we no man after the flesh. In other words, from now on, we're not, just as I have left that old person behind when I got saved, and I don't want to be that person anymore, even though I fail. I shouldn't look at you that way either. You're my brother in Christ. I'm not going to hold against you your past, and I shouldn't. Wherefore henceforth know we no man after the flesh. Yea, though we have known Christ after the flesh, we knew him as the Jewish man Jesus who did the things that he did in Israel. He says, yet now henceforth know we him no more. I don't think of Jesus Christ anymore as the actor playing him in The Chosen, even though it's refreshing to see him portrayed that way. He's risen. He's the Lord in heaven. He's my Savior. It's not the same picture of him anymore. He's a new thing, if you will. And therefore, verse 17, if any man be in Christ, he is a new creature. Not creature like from the lagoon. A creation, a new creation. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new. In other words, we need to grow up. We need to be perfected so we can realize you are so much more than your flesh and blood. You're more than the pain you carry. You're more than your sufferings, and you're more than the fleshly, carnal instincts that we all have. To God, you're something. You're a new creature in Christ. And he says, verse 18, and all things are of God, who hath reconciled us to himself by Jesus Christ, and hath given to us the ministry of reconciliation. Every one of us that is saved has a ministry. Did you know that? And it's the same ministry, different gifts. But it's the same ministry. It's called the ministry of reconciliation. And what is that? Verse 19. To wit, to give witness, that God was in Christ, reconciling the world unto himself, not imputing their trespasses unto them, and hath committed unto us the word of reconciliation. You've got the greatest message the world could ever know. And you're the only hope the world has in Christ Jesus. In other words, when you share the truth, people get saved. But when we're so caught up in our own myopia and we are focused on our own pain, we're not much use to the ministry of reconciliation. And it's going to take a lot of healing and a lot of love to get to the point where we can recognize then, verse 20, now then we are ambassadors for Christ. I'm supposed to stand on this earth as Christ's ambassador. I'm not supposed to stand here for you to feel sorry for me or to lash out against you because somebody hurt me in the past. I'm supposed to be God's ambassador, Christ's ambassador, as though God did beseech you by us. We pray you in Christ's stead be ye reconciled to God, for he hath made him to be sin for us who knew no sin, that we might be made the righteousness of God in him. And whether you know it or not, and despite your pain and your past, you have God's righteousness through Christ. And you can be perfected, and you can be healed, and you can stand as an ambassador and effectively serve the Lord. And when we talk about being a new creature, I want to show you what I just honed right in with the last thought to leave you with of what I think that means. I always say there's one more verse, and I'm always wrong. Ephesians 2. It is the last verse. Ephesians 2, verse 10. And this word strikes me. For we are his workmanship. You're a work in progress, folks. But God is the craftsman. So trust him. He knows what he's doing. You're going through a hard time. You're going through pain. You're carrying baggage. God knew that before he called you. And he called you as you were. He'll bring the healing. We just open to it. And once we open to it, then the love comes. We are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus, new creature, unto good works, which God hath before ordained that we should walk in them. And I don't mean going around being goody two-shoes. Good works means just showing the love of Christ, getting past our pain and putting others before ourselves. That's the hardest thing for a guy like me to do, because I'm a selfish man. So I'll make you a promise. If you pray for me, I'll pray for you, because we're going to need it. I hope something I said today will help you. I hope it helps me, because I think that what we need more than anything else is to come to that point in our lives where we understand that healing is needed so that the love can come in. And when it fills you up, then it flows out. And then we can be that effective ambassador. And if there's anybody within the sound of my voice that has never trusted Christ as their Lord and Savior, you can't even begin healing until you go to the great physician and you trust Him. Will you trust Him as your Lord and Savior?
Hi, I'm Xena with Bible Mysteries. If you're enjoying the podcast and YouTube videos, please consider making a donation to support us. Your tax-deductible donations can be made through Unlock the Bible Now at utbnow.com. Thank you for your support.